No, 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 don't stop there. You were going along so great, Andrew. That's okay. Look, I'll give you a nice long evaluation for this, okay? Just, really cover both of those sections in detail. But yeah, oh, you're breaking my heart. It's just, you were just really going strong there and giving me a lot of stuff to talk about. All right, well, I got enough to talk about already. So let's jump back. All right, I hope people are not getting sick of me going over these evaluation criteria over and over again. But obviously, the first problem of pitch weight in the upper middle register of the orchestra, that's not a concern. You're not limiting yourself to that because you are spreading out the orchestration across the entire scope of the orchestra for a lot of this piece. Okay, that's fine. The next concern is thematic material repeats quite often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exactly the same way throughout. Well, in fact, it's pretty much identical in both parts, except that, right in here, you're adding some bass, right? You're adding more like double bass, tuba, and contrabassoon, and strengthening it. I'm wondering if you could maybe ease off a little bit more. Like, is there something about the intensity here that, you could have, like, backed off a little bit more even at that, right? And then broaden the scope here even more intensely, right? Is there something, could you go plus what you're doing here and slightly minus what you're doing there, and then possibly these two these two sections could contrast each other a little bit more, right? Now, I think the snare drum is great. I don't think you can get away with this much slapstick. And there's also the thing that you have to, like, move the jaws or the boards of the slapstick apart. So, like, it's, you're asking the player to go slap, 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 slap. And I'm not sure that really, it's the kind of thing, like, if you hear the beginning of the Ravel Piano Concerto in G. That is like the most well-known example of the whip, and I think Ravel also puts it in doesn't he put it in the Pictures at an Exhibition? I believe it's also in there as well. So, but that's it starts off with a slap, da da dun dun da da dun da da dun da da dun dun. So, like, but can you do 20 in a row, right? Does that work? It doesn't quite work for me. But I mean, I'm not the ultimate arbiter of taste or whatever. That has to be you, the orchestrator, right? I'm just saying that I think for the audience it might be a bit much, and just in terms of the actual effect of a fortissimo, this much slapping, it's really going to just dominate everything in the orchestra if it really does come off. It's sort of like, it's kind of like it has the strength of a xylophone. I've been sort of lecturing about not using too much xylophone. It has the acoustic strength of the xylophone, only even more, but without a pitch, right? So it's really, really is intense. So watch out. Yeah, somebody posted, like, how many times can you use slapstick in a row or something like that. If that was you, Andrew, I apologize for being slightly snarky. That, like, once in a career, I think is what I said. So, like, just watch out. It's a sound that is really, really individual, and it gets, I think it could get old really, really fast with the, you know, average audience that doesn't have, you know, have the same kind of, you know, taste for that sound. If you really, really love that sound, then I apologize. I don't mean to be dismissive or anything, or too jovial. A couple other little things to think about. Let's throw in a tenor clef here. And all of this suddenly becomes beautifully readable, right? And then I think you could do the same thing with the bassoon, right? Yeah, it just makes a whole lot more sense. And then right here, I'd restore the bass clef. Yeah. Anyways, so aside from these, you know, talking about contrast and obsessing over the slapstick and whatever, it's interesting. On the next page, it's called whip in the abbreviation. But I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a couple of boards with a hinge on them, and you just slap them together. So, just talking about the overall orchestration of this, it's not the most balanced. There's something kind of strange here. You've got your pitches pointing the wrong way. There we go. That fixed it. So yeah, just select it and type X, and it'll flip things back the way that they should be. Perhaps it's kind of strange. Yeah, and then here, not sure why this is the way it is. Here I'm fixing your score for you. Right, so that's how everything should look. Okay, I'm wondering if some pitches were copy pasted from somewhere else where things were split up, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, the big problem that you got here, I would say, and I see what you're doing right here. Like you want the you're basically realizing the grace notes as notes played on the beat, right? So you just end up with this really wonderful, just, you know, these wonderful dissonances. And I think that that's really, really cool. I think that in some respects, though, like, I think you need to use certain instruments in places and in ways that they are the absolute strongest, right? So, you know, what is the major, you know, what is the theme here? It's really B, 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 C, right? So I think that that is where you want to introduce the orchestral color the most, right? And what is the element that turns wind band scoring into orchestral scoring? It is the string section, right? So if you really want this to feel more orchestral, then I think that you should emphasize the B's, not the G versus the G natural. I think just as a side note, I think if you have one instrument that has a G natural and you have another instrument right next to it that's playing a G sharp, then you need to do this. Hang on. Let me just bring this over here. Just jump to your accidentals page on the keypad, and then click this button, right? So that the player who's playing the natural realizes that it is a natural versus somebody else's sharp. Okay. You could also spell this as F double sharp as well. That's probably even better. So anyhow, but I think that, like, if you were to underline B in your strings, right, just have big octaves of B's and possibly even an E in the middle, then you get the uninterrupted sound of the strings working together with winds, right, and then with most of your most of your brass below that, then I think that it's going to work really, really well. But I think the way that this is now, you're barely going to be able to hear the strings. They'll get sort of swallowed up. Like you have your first violins being doubled by the trumpets and the oboes, and your clarinets, and then you've got your second violins doubled by second trumpet and by excuse me, by bass clarinet and English horn and so on. So like it's, yeah, I mean, you would think, well, you know, that'll sort of all add to that quality and everything else, but I feel that just like, you know, because we can't really hear the you know, yes, you will have that combined quality, but it'll mostly be about the brass and the winds, and you'll barely be able to hear the strings. So the sense of this being really orchestral is going to be somewhat dampened down, right? So it's going to be sort of affected. It's going to be less orchestral and more sort of kind of wind band like with the way that that's all scored, and especially like as you just like go immediately to, you know, just the wind section right in here, right? Now, you do not need to finish, you do not need to complete. Yata dun dun bum, right? See, it's dun 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 bum 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 dun 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 dun. Right? So like if you always have to finish the yata dun dun dun, yata dun dun dun, the second time around, you know, bringing this phrase to an end on the downbeat, right? And we've got the same thing here, especially in trumpets, which are going to be, trumpet's going to be really hugely strong. It's taking away from the individuality of the line, right? Just the right. The note is just weaker, right? It's like it's not allowed to really shine in its own light, is what I'm cautioning there. By, you know, by these notes having to finish up what they see as a, you know, as their own little motive. Yeah, and this is very, very cool, the way that you have interpreted this. So this is leading us to our next concern, and that is melodic development soaring quite high, accompaniment figures covering a wide range, and I love the way that you're sort of splitting up the duties of the accompaniment amongst the bass clarinet and clarinets. Very, very effective. And then here we've got bassoons plus oboes and English horn. So this is really lovely. You've got the two different tone colors, and I think that that's fantastic. So you get the kind of cooler tone color here of the clarinet family, supporting the you know, oboes, A2 oboes, and flutes and octaves. And then here you have the bassoons and, you know, basically the double reed family supporting the clarinets, right, and violins. And this is a very, very cool way of stacking the melody, to have the clarinets below rather than above the violins. I think that works really, really well. So it's almost like it'll, you know, to the careless ear, this will sound almost like violas or something playing below, right? But of course you're playing A2, and, you know, as I mentioned before, like A2 kind of at the bottom of the clarino register going into the throat tones and so on. Doesn't quite get to the throat tones, but yeah, you know, A2, it sort of has that kind of slight reedy sound. It's almost like a reed organ of some kind, or kind of like an accordion. Especially as exposed like this, but then the you know, the combination with the strings is going to ameliorate that somewhat. So that's really talking about mostly about the accompaniment figure, so well done on that. And then as to the melodic development going very, very high, you made a really good decision right in here. I really like the way you trade off to piccolo. Right? I think that that's very, very cool. And then, yeah, second oboe jumping down and then jumping back up to D here. I think that that all works great. Now here, this is nicely scored, but I would actually have the piccolo come in earlier, like maybe right around here. I just have this be the piccolo note. And don't worry about the piccolo being in a weak register. It'll strengthen as it goes upwards, right? And if you were really concerned about that, you could even have a little bit of flute in there as well. But I just feel that it's so obvious that the piccolo starts here, right? You want to take away that obviousness. So, you know, having the piccolo start at, say, like around forte. Are you crescendoing from fortissimo to fortissimo? Is it possible for you to drop the volume here, right? So fortissimo, forte, fortissimo, forte, crescendo to fortissimo again, right? Or keep it fortissimo and then drop down to forte here and then crescendo to fortissimo, or drop down to mezzo forte and then crescendo to fortissimo. So, like, I mean, you need some dynamic contrast in here. It's just, you know, otherwise you're just hammering away at the audience's ear, right? You want to give them, you want the fortissimo to mean something in contrast to something else. But yeah, start the piccolo a little earlier. It can take over this note here. Yeah, and like as the piccolo gets higher, it'll insinuate itself more and more into the flavor of what the timbre of the violin here. Now here you're sending your violinist all the way up to this beautiful proud high E, and you didn't put an ottavo mark over it, and you get an extra brownie point for that. That's really, really exactly the right thing, Andrew. So yeah, it does not need. I mean, I could read that note, and I'm not that much of a violinist. Okay, so like, yeah, it's, you know, and kind of thinking about like how I would do the positions across the violin right in here. Yeah, it just really makes a whole lot of sense. Just, yeah, just leave it alone. It doesn't need to be written out as ottava and so on. So yeah, that's great. So yeah, but just, yeah, I'd say like when you start here with the piccolo and every, like, you also are starting with the English horn and the flute at the same time, then I think you sort of run the risk of just suddenly, like, they're just suddenly feeling the weight there, and it's kind of like, you know, everything was going along fine with the clarinets and the violin, and suddenly we added all these other notes or these other instruments right in here, right? I don't think you want that. I think you want them to insinuate themselves into the texture of the line, right? So have the piccolo start a little earlier. You know, you could even have your English horn start back here, you know, just sort of drop and then come in under and so on. So like there maybe just a little bit more work on that, I'd say. Okay. Now you rush up to here, and then there's a definite break, and you go into this lovely phrasing that starts on the second beat, so that's all great. And ba 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 yeah dun 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 dun. If there's any flaw here, that is that I just feel like the melody line is not very strong against all of this brass, right? It's just, you know, all you got going on here are these violins. You don't have any octaves in your second violins to support this, right? And you got, you know, you got the trumpets soaring up here to this high C and then B and B flat and so on. Could you possibly score that down an octave? You know, you could still have this E and that G and stuff, but just take the first part, give it to the second, and drop it an octave, right? Yeah, I just think that this is, you know what everybody's going to hear in practice. Like, you know, here we have theory and practice, right? So in theory, it's not so bad with the mock-up, but in practice, this is just going to scream. This, you know, what are you going to hear here is just, you know, C, B, B flat, really, really high, just really loud, right? Just, and you know, the thing about it is that the trumpet already sounds higher. You know, because the body of tone of the trumpet is sitting above it in this like octave and a fifth. All right, so like if you score a C down here, like you are going to hear the C up here very, very clearly, plus the C above that and the G, right, in the overtones. It's going to be very powerful. That's why, like, when you push the trumpet very, very high, you're hearing the C above that and the C above that and the G in the middle, right? So you don't need to be so high here, I don't think. So just take everything down a notch, right? And then we don't have to worry about this so much, but I still worry about it, right? So is there something, you know, is there some instrument that you could be using to, you know, to double with here? You know, maybe a clarinet could help, or oboe for a nice warm line, or flute for like a straighter, more intense line. Yeah. Or could you do this in octaves in the strings, or what are the options here, right? It's just that the brass are so powerful, and that high C is so powerful, right? And this high G is also very powerful, right? Sounding C. So just watch out. But, you know, I love this in principle, though. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very, very fun, and I love the idea of the clarinets once again, you know, playing octaves with the violins. You know, if you had a free set of violas here, that would also work really, really nicely and bolster this. And then, but I would still add a voice to this somehow, some way. All right, and that leads us to, you know, bump, 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 and this is just so cool. It's like the way that this is all scored. Now, the big problem is that you're taking the piccolo lower and lower and lower and saying crescendo at the same time, right? So, I mean, I love the harmonization of the lines here and everything. I just feel that, like, the lower you get, the less effective your flute family is, and then you are pitting your flute family as the kind of the higher pitches here against stronger, more pungent instruments, like all of these reed instruments down here, the bassoons and the contrabassoon coming in here and everything else. So I don't think this is going to balance with the, you know, is there some way that you can start off here with this beautiful bright color and then trade off right around here to other instruments, just kind of dovetail in and out of the parts, and then just end up with stronger, you know, like instead of just having this one single oboe line right in here that just peters out, you've got, and is basically just doubling the English horn. Can the oboes come in and start taking over these lines so that you have a nice, beautiful, thick, reedy sound by the time you get to here in all the instruments, and not, you know, just really kind of weak piccolo right in here. And for that matter, like, you know, who could take over this line is first flute, right? And so the first flute would, by the time it reaches this E and this D, that is E and D at the top of the staff, and that still has a little bit of strength to it in the flute, and that could be played A2. So I'd say, like, right around, like, trade this off to oboes, and then right around here, trade off this line to your flutes A2, and then you've got a balance in there. But, you know, but once again, in principle, I really love what's going on here. It's, you know, just, you have such great ideas, and I just love the crunching sound right in here. Really, you know, really what it reminds me of is like Scarlatti. Like Scarlatti would, like, he'd throw in some rolled chords on harpsichord, or, you know, or sometimes they wouldn't be rolls, but like maybe the only way you could play it if you were Princess Barbara would be to roll your hands. Apparently she didn't have the largest hands. And that kind of crushing sound, it's like, it really kind of is reminiscent of the folk bands and cantina bands that were around during Scarlatti's time. And, you know, he would have just heard this music out on the street. You know, hopefully he got some time out of the palace and he got a chance to walk around the different cities. And, you know, there's something that he does in his harpsichord music where he'll make a big chord, and the chord will have, it'll sound like there's a grace note in there, but it isn't. It's just everything crushing together. It's this really wonderful exploratory harmony. It's the kind of thing that, like, you just, I mean, Bach is a more advanced harmonist. Don't get me wrong. He's, you know, he's like the most advanced harmonist of that period. But Scarlatti does some things that he never thought of, right? Just because it fits this kind of simulated sound of the little Spanish folk bands on his harpsichord. So that just sort of, that's what kind of reminded me, just like we're just crushing everything together here. I really, really love that. Really great idea, Andrew. Now here at B, we're going on, and, you know, we got our B-flat trumpet kind of, you know, playing that A, dun, 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 along to the pizzicato right in here. So, you know, I would say, like, probably like taking things down a notch, or actually bringing up the pizzicato a notch. I would say, like, yeah, have the trumpet player play mezzo forte, but have the strings play forte, right? Just so that there's some sort of balance right in there. And this is so cool. Now, right in here, I would say, you know, you have to do the handoff. You want to start in your cellos and you want to continue on to your violins. So I'd say start arco here so that this is one continuous line. Because just because the left hand is trading off to the right hand here doesn't mean that this isn't one continuous line. If you look in the piano part, you can kind of see that, like, just, you know, you see the you know, A, E, A lifting out of the left hand, and then the B taking over, and so on. And, you know, by the way, this is still C sharp, right? There's a C sharp sixth at the beginning, right? You can see the C sharp here and the A there in the piano part, and that means this C sharp also applies to the next C sharp, right? So it's still, that's why it sounds really weird. You have the major third, and then dun 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 dun. You know, so you're like you're turning this into a natural where it should be a sharp, right? And then on the way back down, like, you're kind of compounding the error by going to C instead of back to D, right? So you're going back to C natural when the context here is C sharp, right? So anyways, watch out for that. And this is supposed to be the fall of a fourth, right? It's supposed to go from D to A, right? So that kind of has the most harmonic sense in the line. All right. So yeah, so I would say go arco, staccato, and then trade off on the A, right? So bum bum, then A trade off, bum 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 bum, and, you know, make this guy a C sharp. All right. Yeah, but I mean, otherwise, I really love the simplicity of it. Just pizzicato accompaniment and the melody in the trumpet, and just little boop right here. You know, one of the problems that naturally arises here is that the whole section has is maintaining differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices, and so on. All right, so starting off, you have the melody on top, and then you have, like, this, you know, we have the melody doubled here, and then we've got the harmony part in the middle, and so on, and the accompaniment below. So that all works out fine because it all has, like, a natural kind of priority and seniority, you know, just depending on its vertical position, right? And then bum. And now it's not so simple, right? Dun, 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 dun. And, like, right in here, you're keeping everything low, and that's fine, but it's just harder and harder to sort of tell the lines apart, right, as they go. So it might be a good time to start bringing in some arco right in here, right, just to help them stay differentiated more. And then we've got once more one of those little bloops. Now here, okay, here's where you commit your biggest sin, Andrew. That is, we've got pizzicato. The line is starting pizzicato, once again trading off from left hand to right hand in the piano score, right? But, you know, just because it's trading off in the piano score doesn't mean that the other instruments involved cannot play the first three notes, right? It's just because it's just sort of like pluck, 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 da 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 da, right? So that's kind of the effect that you end up with here, right? So that's not the greatest thing, right? So just start earlier, right? Have your first bassoon start here. Have your flute, you know, the flute player can definitely start on that E. And, you know, here I would say, like, okay, so what's our balance? Mezzo forte, forte in our parts. Don't be afraid to throw in some crescendo in some of these guys, right? Okay, and then, you know, these parts right in here, I would say definitely score them forte, right? Or you could start from mezzo forte crescendo and then back off, right? Now, one thing that you might have missed, okay, and that is just because of the way that the page breaks in the template, it really looks like this line is ending on a should be a B natural. I wrote B flat on the template, so that was one of the notes I got wrong. Apologies. All right, it looks like it's ending on a B. Okay, but it's actually ending on the triplet. This is the actual line, right? So, so you might want to rethink this slightly, right? Is there some way that you can end with a triplet and then have the, just have your trumpet catch that low B, right? B, or actually it'll be scored as a C. So C, F, F. And I think that this came in, this is supposed to come in here, right? Hang on, I'll fix it for you. Oops, I keep having my finger on the wrong place. All right, so I think this is what you mean. Bum, 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 dun, dun, dun. So change this to a C. Maybe have these guys end with a triplet, right? And then I think that'll fix that section right in here. I really love, like I think everything else you're doing here is working really, really great, Bum, 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 bum. Maybe put in a little bit of crescendo in there, right? And I love this trade-off. Dun, dun, dun. And then right in here, you've got that. Yeah, it's just, yeah, such cool. And then this coming in there, and yeah, I mean, and and I like the trade-offs between the trumpet to horn, back to trumpet again, and so on, and then you sort of hang on the trumpet for a little while. So this is ticking a lot of boxes in my evaluation criteria. So, like, in other words, keeping triplets from overwhelming the melodic line, there's little risk of that, right, with trumpet and horn trading off the line. Widely reaching left-hand patterns, you're sort of dividing it up between pizzicato, lower strings, just a touch here and there of bassoon and so on. So, and lower brass. And that also keeps the textural contours fresh, right? And also trading off the melodic instrument and the instruments playing the triplets. So yeah, it's just like you were just ticking all the boxes, even though to an extent, you probably could have added a lot more, in terms of nuances and articulation marks and everything else, and maybe even thickened up the color here and there with some winds or strings. I still think that you were totally on the right track, so that's why I just didn't want it to end. Damn it, going towards C. Just think you could have done. I think it would have been great. I mean, maybe you couldn't do more, and that is as far as you could go. And I respect that. It's fine. I'll only kid you a little bit about that. But I still think that it was just really a great effort, and especially that first page with all the crazy, harmony just crushed together, and then right here, I think you really captured the essence of the score, even though it's like the scoring's very, very simplistic, right? It's very cut and dry, but it really captures the main elements in a nice way and balances them. And as I said, you could have developed it a little bit more, but it still works great. So just looking forward to that really complex kind of song-like, the cantilena section of this. It would have been interesting to see what ideas that you had if you'd had time to work on that. So thanks so much, Andrew, for sticking with this, and yeah, just like your presence in the community is really, really appreciated. I really I really appreciate sometimes you'll jump in with a thought or with a suggestion or something before I even have a chance to do it, and it just that saves me time and helps everything run smoother. And you've just been so supportive of the different things that are going on. I really, really do. I notice that, and I do appreciate it, and I appreciate it for everybody else who's also helping out in that way. Yeah, it's just really been, this year, I just feel it's been our best year, right? I mean, no disrespect to anybody who has contributed before. It's not really the quality of the contribution so much, although there is that. It really, I'm seeing a rising, like a general rise in quality of our contributions. But I think it's also like, just the whole attitude that everybody's got towards it is just, is whether you're a professional or not, you're giving me a professional outlook and taking responsibility for what you post, and for, you know, for interacting with this in a way that supports everybody. You know, I have yet to run into a comment under somebody's video that is disparaging, right, or overly critical. I think everybody's being really helpful to everybody else, and that makes me the happiest. So this is probably the happiest I've been, even though this is the most work I've ever done on one of these challenges. So thanks everybody for sticking with me, and for, you know, all the support that you're showing in so many different ways, whether it's helping out on Patreon or just, you know, leaving great comments here and there, sharing some of these posts around the community, and you know, giving me some good reactions and views and everything else. That really, really is something that's going to make this one of the most epic challenges ever. So, and with that, I will just leave you with this, with great thanks once again to Andrew for being, you know, such an awesome member of the orchestration line community, and for sending me this really cool score with so much potential. And on to more scores. We are getting close to the end of the dotted brev entries, and we're just about to jump into the longa entries, and then we'll be out of entries. That will be the end of the challenge, and there will be that really big, beautiful finale at the end of the month, which I'm really looking forward to. Thanks, everybody. See you really soon.